Hi guys, my name is Michael, and today I'm going to be presenting my Pecha Kucha on gender and gender identity, as well as the social norms of gender. As someone who identifies as gender fluid, this is a topic that I'm very passionate about, that I've done a lot of research about, and that is really close to my heart. So please remember that during this presentation, I'm talking specifically about gender, not sexuality. Gender and sexuality are not the same thing. Gender and gender identity is who we feel we are on the inside. It's about how we want to express ourselves to the world. Sexuality has to do more with the relationships that we choose to have. Another essential term when I'm talking about gender and gender identity is biological sex. So, biological sex is assigned at birth as either male, female, or sometimes intersex, displaying both characteristics and physical reproductive parts of male and female. So, gender is a social construct, and it starts before you're even born. Society will start pushing gender norms and gender stereotypes while the parent is still pregnant. One of the biggest questions that people love to ask a pregnant individual is, "What are you having?" And then they throw entire parties with nothing but revealing the sex of the child. Once the child is born, a doctor will take a look in between their legs and claim it's a, and fill in the blank, and that is your assigned sex. Most parents assume at that point that it's a cut and dry conversation, that that's the end of the story. But that's far from true. That's actually just where your gender story actually begins. During early development, children are exposed at a very young age to the differences in social norms for male and female. Boys are sold on masculinity, such as toy cars, trucks, play tools, when girls are sold on housekeeping and play kitchens and how to maintain a home. Most of our learning of gender comes from our parents and from social cues. This can cause some kids to become frustrated or confused because they cannot communicate that something about their gender identity just doesn't feel right. And that's where exposing children to all kinds of toys is very important for their learning. And that's where gender neutral parenting comes in. Gender neutral parenting is a parenting style that means that you raise your children in an environment where they are free to express themselves openly, they can play with both sets of toys, and you stay away from hurtful terms like "stop crying like a girl" or telling a little boy to man up. Puberty is a time, kind of a tough time for any teen, but especially someone who is battling with gender identity. This is where teens start to find out who they are. And they might start to struggle with their self image, and sometimes the brain doesn't match the body. So, now that we've kind of covered the two sexes and the tip of the iceberg of how society views gender, let's dive more into the different forms of gender identity. Is gender black and white, or is there a gray area that falls in between the two genders? This answer will honestly vary from person to person, and gender can ultimately be defined by the individual. They can choose to present themselves however they please. They can live with or without labels. They can live beyond the binary. They can live in the binary. Gender doesn't always have to be labeled, and it can fall under a bunch of different umbrellas and a bunch of different terms. So binary, non-binary, what does all of that mean? Well, a binary, think computers, is two things that are constant and repeated, so ones and zeros. So when it comes to gender, that would basically mean male or female. This would mean a assigned male living as male and an assigned female living as female. So if binary means male and female, and for argument's sake, we will say that those are the only two options, then what does non-binary mean? Non-binary means anything that doesn't fall into those categories. They might be a mix and match of those categories, masculine presenting, feminine presenting, agender, gender queer. Because gender is a spectrum, meaning that you can land anywhere on the spectrum that you would like. So in this picture, you have the male and female, and you have all of that area in between. And gender is also fluid. It means it moves like water. It can change, it can evolve. and it's not always set in stone. So now let's talk about gender identity versus gender expression. So gender identity is internal, meaning that's how you feel that your gender is on the inside. And then you can choose to show that to the rest of the world through gender expression. And you don't have to. It's just allowing that to shine through for everyone else to see. So, how does society affect our gender identity? Well, society and individual cultures set their own standards for gender roles, um, and they have guidelines that are established for how females and males in that culture should dress, how they should act, and even the jobs that they can and cannot have. So, if we take a step back for a minute, society used to be a lot more lenient on the whole gender thing. So, if you think Shakespeare, for example, back when men were exclusively allowed to be actors and females were not, if there were a female role, men would have to take on that role. Even the ancient Greek god Dionysus was the god of wine and fertility. And there is poetry and stories about him driving men into madness by changing forms. That change of form is something that we can interpret today as him presenting more feminine in order to seek more partners. In today's society, celebrities are leaders at the forefront of giving a voice to gender identity and how it's okay to express yourself however you want. The stigma on boy and girl is slowly starting to fade as people become more comfortable with themselves and seeing other people identify differently than they do. So remember that how you express your gender identity is one of the ways that you stay true to your authentic self. Don't worry about what others think or say, because a lot of times that's their own insecurity bleeding through. I want to thank you guys so much for listening to me today. I hope I've shed a little light on gender, and if you have any questions, let me know.